Testing this out, seeing if it's going to work. Looks like we got the live feed going and some sounds. So, trying something new today. I'm gonna just paint and talk because it's Saturday, a couple days after Thanksgiving. Got a value scale set up. I don't usually do that, but a really simple way to vary the intensity of a lot of your colors is simply to make a value scale with different grays, light to dark, and then find the value of the color you're mixing and just add a little bit of that gray to it, and it'll take down the intensity of that color. Again, it's not something that I do all the time, but it is something that does the job. I'm going to try to go for 2 hours today, and I am periodically checking the chat. If anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out. Just moved into my new studio in Prague, Czech Republic. Beginning to get situated here. Starting to get cozy. Takes a little while. Takes a little while to get cozy in this place. But I'm making myself at home. If you're wondering what I'm painting, I tend to do a lot of abstract figurative paintings. I started out at a really traditional figurative academy called the Lime Academy of Fine Arts, which was located in Old Lyme, Connecticut. And I went there for a year before moving on. I loved it. I had great teachers there. I feel really lucky to have been able to study there. And pretty much while we were there, all you did was paint the figure, and you could paint the figure from the morning until the nighttime every single day. I think classes started at 9, and you'd have like a painting class from 9 to 12, lunch, and then 1 to 4. So you'd have 6 hours for one class. This is the old school studio classes. I don't know if they do that anymore. But back in my day, the studio class was twice as much time. So one class would be 6 hours long, which seemed about right. You could get started in the morning, mess it up, go for lunch, come back, and then hopefully salvage the painting that you've made. Got a bunch of different tracks off of the YouTube library, so I'm not sure what's coming up, but I wanted to keep it streaming safe for my background music. What I'm doing on the painting right now is pretty much just solidifying a lot of these shapes, going back in with some darks. And this is kind of an old way I used to paint, and it got changed up a little bit through the years. But I don't have access to all my materials. I still need to get a compressor for an airbrush. And everything's still closed here in Czech Republic. You have to order online and then go to the shop and pick up your order. It usually takes a couple days to get stuff. I've done a couple orders, but I kept it simple and just got cad yellow, cad red, titanium white, ivory black, and phthalo blue. So getting back into the groove. Basically, I start off one day and just make a big mess, because the background oil, I like to let it dry for a couple layers. go on top of it. Just the way that the oil paint reacts on top of oil paint, I think is really nice. So these paintings always take more than one day. And in my studio, where I'm at right now, it's not the warmest studio in the world. It gets pretty chilly. Got like one of those plug-in heaters that you can activate through Wi-Fi, so that's kind of nice. So I can turn it on before I get to the studio. But it's pretty cold, and oil paint just doesn't really dry very well in the cold. So I'm finding that a lot of my paintings are taking like 6-7 days to dry. But once they do, usually it would take a day. When I was painting in Colorado, it would take 1 day for my paintings to dry because it's so dry there. And I was in a place with really serious ventilation. Speaking of which, I do paint basically with no paint thinner. And all I use is a little bit of linseed oil and mix some liquid into the linseed oil. Or you can mix some cobalt dryer into the linseed oil as well. And that'll help it dry faster. I made that my first attempt at live streaming was that time I made that really sticky paint, and I was really excited about it. So that was cool. And it was drying within like hours then, actually. But now I've got it to the point where I suppose I could add more liquid, and I could add more cobalt medium to it, make it dry even faster, but whatever. Pretty much just have to do a painting every 3 or 4 days. Just do a new painting every day in order to have a dry one every day to work on top of. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. I am checking from time to time. Hello, 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 everybody in the chat. At this point, sometimes my brain slows down a little bit when I'm painting. It's going to be a long 2 hours. We're going to see where we go. But I'm in it for the long haul. I'd like to do 24 hours. That was one thing we used to do in Chicago. When I was going to school there, we'd paint for... There was one day, we just did it once. It wasn't something we did commonly. But you'd paint try to draw for 24 hours straight. Everybody pretty much zonked out around 3:30 or 4. Everyone kind of stopped paying attention around 1:30 and cheating and stuff like this. But it would be a fun exercise to try again, to go for 24 hours straight. I don't know if there's any benefit, because you're not really resting your mind at any point. You just keep going and going and going. But it was a fun thing to do, and you ended up with some really odd drawings. You just put a pen in your hand, no matter where you go, no matter what you do, you just keep drawing. You can switch it up at certain points and start drawing with your left hand as well, which is pretty fun to do sometimes too, drawing with your wrong hand. So we're on day 2 of this abstract figurative piece. Let's see where it's gonna go. It's working with these oranges. Everything gets pretty muddy when you mess up the layer underneath it. So, trying to pull out of that mud a little bit. There's a guy, Alexander Kanevsky. If you want to check out his paintings, he's a good guy to check out. Alexander Kanevsky. He used to teach at Philadelphia Academy of Fine Arts. PAFA. And he talked about making a big mess and working your way out of it, which I kind of like a lot. Make a mess and work your way out of it. It's kind of where I'm at. I'm still at the mess stage. But just like when we look at clouds, we get to see, like, sitting on our backs, looking up at the sky, some big cumulus clouds, and a bunny rabbit goes by, and a jester head goes by, and a bear goes by. That's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm just looking at the clouds, trying to find different animals and things and stuff in them. Mainly just working with big areas of form. This painting's still gonna take more days. Still in the middle stage, but gonna try for 2 hours straight today, talking and painting and painting and talking. We have to all be with ourselves during this time, don't we? Talking to ourselves. The silence. It's always good. I got headphones in, I got the same music on, but like I said, this is all YouTube safe audio. But it's kind of mellow. Reminds me of like Portishead back in the day. Trip hop. It's always good to check out. When I was going to school in Glasgow, the Glasgow School of Art, they had a club that was opposite the art school. And there was always a really long line, but if you were a student, you could actually get people in the long line if you had a card. So you could basically just find some people in the line and sign them in as guests or whatever. But back then I was really into drum and bass, going out dancing a lot. Of course, the Glasgow School of Art, eventually it's burned down twice since I've left. 2 times, not even once. It's like the first time I saw it, I still remember like the hallways at night, and it just felt so old, and like, you know, there'd be a Macintosh door. For those that don't know, it was the Glasgow School of Art was designed by this architect, Charles Rennie Mackintosh, pretty considered like the first modernist architect, and this is one of his first buildings. And so he designed everything. He had designed all the doorknobs, had this ridiculously beautiful library. Be a good thing to Google out if you want to. The Glasgow School of Art library was really amazing. And all the doorknobs, all the everything, all the doors. But you got to sit in there and paint because they, in the original agreement for using the space as an art school, they somehow stipulated that it always had to be used as an art school. So I'd be sitting in there painting sometimes, and there'd be actual tour groups coming through. And they'd look at you kind of like there is an artist in his habitat painting. I didn't have the best spot. I didn't get a window, but felt lucky to be in there. And then it burned down, and I was like, how could that building even burn down? It doesn't even make sense. It was so, it felt like it was made of steel and concrete, the whole thing. Well, the library had a lot of wood in it, but when it burned down and everybody was sad, they started rebuilding it, and then somehow it burned down again. It's like 2 years ago during the rebuilding process. So hopefully it gets back. It's an awesome place to visit if you get a chance. Glasgow is a really nice town. Has a tough reputation. Back then it did. But coming from Chicago, it didn't. If you're in the wrong area of Chicago, you're definitely in the wrong place. And I felt that a couple times in Glasgow as well. I remember I was walking home from a party one time there, and like somebody ran a car into a street light, and the dude came out of the car and just started walking up to me. It's like he just crashed a car and then he started walking up to me like he wanted to fight or something. So I just walked off, and there was no altercation or anything. But I think that's kind of the sort of thing that can happen back in the day, in Glasgow at least. I think Jenny Saville actually went there, who's a great painter to check out as well. Has these really luscious figurative paintings back in the 90s. So I can see a question coming up in the comments about brush strokes, and Monet, not sure if this is a topic, but I'd love to see a video on brush strokes. Monet comes to mind with his horizontal and vertical lines depending on where an object is positioned. So if you want to really look at somebody good with brush strokes, basically I would think about brush strokes the same way you think about hatching. So you want to hatch with the direction of your object. You know, if you're hatching a cylinder, you want to hatch around that cylinder. Use marks that go around that space. And so Monet, they were trying to flatten the picture plane. They really wanted to flatten the canvas. That was part of what it was about. It's part of what abstract expressionism is about too, is the flatness of the canvas itself. So Monet's like kind of, vertical and horizontal marks kind of mimic the edges of that canvas, the edges of that rectangle. Whenever we see stuff that goes up the edge of the rectangle, that kind of flattens out the space a little bit. So a lot of those impressionist paintings would use those crisscross marks, which would really flatten the canvas quite a bit. I think, everybody kind of falls into their own brush strokes, and it's kind of like signing your name in a way. You just keep doing it, and it gets ground into your head. I was talking a little bit yesterday about deliberate practice and making sure that, when you're practicing, that you're doing so in a way that actually improves your abilities as well. So brush strokes is certainly one way you can explore that more and more. Lucian Freud, if you want to Google out Lucian Freud's self-portrait, if you want a good indication of brush strokes and how important they are to show different planes of the face. Juan Uglo is another painter, E-U-A-N, last name Uglo, U-G-L-O-W. He's a good one to look at as well. All about the planes intersecting with one another. Pulling the mud out. I don't know about that eye. I think I'm gonna have to eventually take that eye out. It's good to try to figure out where stuff is. You can also see how forgiving. Oh, get this over here. Hold on. Get this set up better. Face is melting. They used to always call them blobbies. My daughter always makes fun of them and calls them blobby heads. But you can check out my other paintings on my Instagram, Jeremiah Polacek, P-A-L-E-C-E-K. Check those out if you want as well. You can see where this is headed. It's at a goofy stage. You feel naked. Putting your goofy painting up before it's done. I used to hate when people would look at my paintings when they weren't finished. That was always super annoying because they'd ask you to change something and you're like, yeah, I know I have to change that. This does not look like the Queen yet. Still needs work. I don't even know why I'm bothering with this eye. It's not gonna make it. This could have been a bad idea. Just going straight for 2 hours though. I gotta stick to it. Stick to streaming. No matter how wonky my painting goes, stick with it. I like thinking a lot about people and avatars. So a lot of times when people see my paintings, they're like, what are you talking about? This doesn't look digital at all. This doesn't have anything to do with avatars and video games. And that's how I started out, actually, or I shouldn't say started out, but the first time I made paintings anybody cared about, they were video games. And that was about 14 years ago now. 14 years ago, yeah. And you can Google it out, Boing Boing, Jeremiah Polacek. And I got up there, and it was a really odd, weird experience. I was making these paintings of video games because I've been interested in the screen for quite a while. Growing up playing classic Nintendo games on the Nintendo Entertainment System and all this sort of stuff. So I was making paintings of Road Rash and pixel paintings like in the late 90s. And then people kind of got interested in that and had this cascading effect online where a bunch of people were blogging about these paintings of Super Mario and stuff like that. But over the years, my work's got a lot more organic and blobby, and I like things to just be more amorphous. yeah, this is fun to do with oil paints. You know, it's always about making sure to let it dry, right? It's the one problem. Let it dry, let it dry. It takes days to dry. But I always have students that are like, I'm scared to do oils because I think they're too difficult. But really, when I first started out, I remember I painted terribly for, well, look at this painting. But I painted really terribly. I didn't understand paint at all until I got to the Lime Academy, and had Susan Stevenson was my teacher, and I think she's from Louisiana. She's got a great southern accent, regardless. But yeah, she came up to me and she was like, "Oh, sweetheart, no." And I had like lemon yellow and alizarin crimson and zinc white. It had like all transparent paints. Like all of them were transparent, and I was trying to paint with them, and I was like, why isn't this covering anything? And basically, everything's transparent. Just look at the back of your paint tube, and you'll see a little box. It has an X in it, or it'll be black, and then it's opaque. And yeah, she just told me you gotta just buy cadmium. You gotta buy cadmium yellow, you gotta buy cadmium red. And I remember seeing the price. There's a school store there, and seeing the price in the store, I was like, what? $14 for a little tube of paint? But then I started realizing that this paint actually covers when you paint with it. That was my first introduction to actually working with paint that covered, wasn't transparent. Thanks, George. Thanks, G Putt. Rizro. If you don't paint thick and are willing to scrub out and redo stuff, oil isn't that bad. Yeah, I don't paint too thick, actually. I keep it... I have to force myself to get a little thick from time to time. But when we were learning in the early days, when I started out, basically it was all about alla prima and pretty much getting all your paint the same consistency, and no blending on your canvas. So that was considered a bad thing. And you might be thinking, why wouldn't you blend on your canvas? It was always that. This is the Stephen Sheehan method of painting, who was a teacher there as well, legendary teacher, and he was the head of the Ralph Mayer place at Yale, which is the guy who wrote that giant artist handbook. And he would always he was kind of brutal. I remember one time he came by and he was like, "Polachek, what are you doing, painting a house?" So, yeah, that would be a comment you'd get from time to time. Another time he came into school after he chopped off his thumb while making frames. He just chopped off the end of it. It wasn't like his whole thumb was gone. But he came back into school with his thumb chopped off afterwards. But anyway, the Steve Sheehan method back then was he taught a class called Figure and Interiors. And in this class, you would just paint. We had a model, but you weren't ever supposed to really just blend stuff out and ever get involved in details, and you had to treat the entire space and the figure in the same way. Like, that was the goal of the class, was to just treat those two things exactly the same. So that meant, like, if you're looking at a shadow of, you know, somebody's easel that's behind the figure, you had to treat that shadow behind the figure the same way you would treat a shadow under the figure's chin. And he'd always talk about hiding the figure. Hide the figure in the space. So that was a really interesting exercise. I still do it from time to time. You can see it in Degas all the time. If you look at Degas' paintings, oftentimes his big shadow shapes will go from an arm, go underneath the table, go into the background, this sort of thing. Yeah, that's right, Rizro. The old never blend. I don't know what was up with that. I don't think people talk about never blending anymore. It wasn't that long ago either, where it felt like a rule. You're not supposed to blend on your canvas. I suppose the main thing is, like, sometimes everything can get too blendy and get a little bit too muddy, and it forces you to commit to your colors on your palette. So I guess you can see on my palette I still have what my palette looks like my painting. That was what they said all the time. Your palette should look like your painting. But meaning that your palette should contain all these different colors and all these color variations, all these different value variations. You should be mixing up piles of those, because at certain times you got to go back and grab stuff. So it makes sense. This is all, like, literally my first painting class. What I'm talking about with Susan Stevenson. She teaches out in California now, but she makes really cool paintings, nice plein air stuff. Things can get muddy. Muddy and chalky were two words you'd hear quite frequently as well in crits. Things getting too muddy, meaning everything's getting gray, or getting too chalky, where everything gets pastel-y. So you can always use yellow, a little bit of yellow if you're adding white. Just add a little bit of yellow as well. Give it a little bit of spice, you know? Right? Oh, Lord. Alright, we're 30 minutes in. Muddy colors for sure. Real colors don't blend like paint. Certain colors, of course, have more, like, blendiness. They're just easier to blend. This blue, easy. Really easy to blend. Of course, you gotta just pay attention to, this is just white and blue pretty much, and I'm using the same brush for all of this. It's like a little number 6 flat, and yeah, like I was saying with blue, it might be a good one to start off with, is just doing blue and white drawings or black and white paintings. Of course, that used to be the old academy method as well, which would be first year, all you do is draw charcoal casts, black and white. Second year, you just paint in black and white. And then third year, you learn color. I don't know if anybody does that anymore. Maybe some ateliers or something. Speaking of which, as you can see, I'm in my studio, but I got a storefront studio actually, which is, it's an actual storefront in Prague, and I'm going to be teaching classes out of here. I call it the Oko Academy, and I just want to teach individually. I just want to teach one person. I got a lot of students online. I still teach through the University of Colorado online, and that's great. I love teaching online. I know we're all missing being with people during this time, of course, so maybe I'm just being romantic as well, having the idea of one student, but I've already got one. We've got one that will begin in January, and so every 2 months I'll be working with one student and do individual painting lessons with them in my studio, twice a week, 3 times a week sometimes. But yeah, I was just looking a lot at the old workshop model and what actually people did when they had workshops. You know, the idea of what we have with art school today is really kind of odd, right? Because we're 30 people with one teacher, or 25 people with one teacher, or whatever. But it serves its function, and I feel super lucky, like I said, to be able to study with really people I still think about all the time. But looking back at how people used to learn painting, it was really a workshop model. That's really how people used to learn. Of course, they'd be apprenticed at like 12 or something like that. I'm not going to deal with that. But they would start when they were super young. Like, you look at Raphael, of course he was with Da Vinci, right? Can't go wrong. Lucky kid. But the kid could paint from an early age, so what are you going to do? But still, you get apprenticed to Da Vinci. Come on. But yeah, you would just work with one person, and they would, I think, you know, I'm just trying this out. We'll see if it works or not. But I feel like individual painting lessons should really be a thing, the same way individual piano lessons are a thing as well, you know? You really get to sit with the teacher, even if you're doing scales on the piano. You can still just sit with the teacher and play those scales. And they can help you and give you feedback, which I think is pretty similar to this sort of thing as well. It's kind of the thing we don't get at all now, where everybody's focused on other things. It's hard to get somebody's personal attention on what you're doing. I do have some online options for that as well, to critique your work and stuff like that through Patreon. If anybody's interested. But I'm really interested in working with somebody in real life. Like I said, I already have a few people lined up. I think the first available spot, let's see, we got January, February, March. First spot would probably not be available until May at this point, because I have students booked up until then. But if you're interested, you can go to oko.academy. Oko means I in Czech, so the I Academy, and you can see more things there. I see George is asking, are in real life art communities still a thing? Maybe ones with a common theme or movement? Yes. Odd Nerdrum. Check out Odd Nerdrums. I think he's in, I always get it mixed up. Pretty sure it's Norway. It should be Norway. But anyway, look at Odd Nerdrum. There's even some videos people have made of people that have studied with Odd Nerdrum as well, and their experience there. But he's, a super well-known contemporary painter is also, I think there's different houses there even, and everybody's given tasks. It's kind of like you're an apprentice at a tattoo shop or something like that, where you got to sweep the floor and clean the machines or whatever. But I think there's some different tasks that people do, and of course Odd Nerdrum was obsessed with Titian. Actually, he was copying a lot of Titian's paintings, and but he's a completely contemporary painter. If you look up his paintings, you can see that he's making really contemporary looking oil paintings. They're not meant to look like Titian's, but he certainly aped a lot of stuff from his processes and techniques and the way Titian created paintings. And so he teaches that method, really, of painting. And with me as well, it's kind of like, I can paint apples on a table, and I intend on doing that I still do that, when I'm teaching normally in classes and stuff like that. But I feel like if we had some time to both work on certain themes with one person, I could really mentor and help somebody out a lot more, back in the way it used to happen, at least. Where are we at? 41 minutes. All right. Going strong. There's probably some other goofy communities. I don't know. I'm always wary of communities. Probably could get kind of culty. I don't think Odd Nerdrum stuff is culty, but I don't know. What is that movie? Wild Wild Country on Netflix. That's a good one to check out. Just about a commune that they tried to start in the United States, and literally irrigate entire fields and farm and doing all this stuff. It got totally insane. It's produced by the Duplass. Yeah, the Duplass brothers produced it, actually. So we're going 2 hours today. If you have any questions, let me know down in the comments. I'll be checking them occasionally. Just chipping away at this one. So, with abstract art, or abstract figurative art, we're kind of in a goofy spot, because abstract painting is usually meant to deal with shapes and forms, colors and lines that make different compositions that don't exist or don't have any reference to the real world itself. So when we think about a lot of different Western art, especially in the Renaissance, we see that a lot of paintings are actually informed by logic, right? Perspective being the main way that we look at a painting, and even thinking about compositions working, with the rule of thirds, or, there's certain rules for compositions and these sort of things, right? And of course, we're also interested in making stuff look real. I think everybody hits a point when they're 14 years old or something like that, when they just want stuff to look real. It doesn't look real enough, right? And that's a lot about just wanting to control the picture plane and, have oil paint do what it does, really. It has a really amazing ability to capture and recreate light on certain surfaces. So Jan van Eyck's Arnolfini wedding, you should definitely look at. Flemish painting, pre-Renaissance. All those guys were tracing. Not that it's a problem, but most of them were using optics of some sort. And we can think about, even in like, what is that Kevin Costner movie, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and they have like the telescope. Anyway, there was a lot of like optics. When you think about optics, dealing with telescopes and looking at the world in a different way, even corrective lenses, glasses, fixing your vision. We started learning about that stuff right before the Renaissance. So the way we were looking and the way we were seeing was changing greatly during the Renaissance as well. And just actually experiencing the world. Of course, Galileo would use a telescope looking at the moon. That'd create all sorts of problems for himself as well. But looking at the world was a problem. We could focus on this world. We could focus on the reality that we're living in. It's different. Painting used to be more about telling stories, specifically, usually religious stories. So to paint a tree, to focus on this world, back then, was a pretty revolutionary idea. You could focus on a tree or focus on a leaf, on a wing of a bird, all this sort of stuff. Of course, later on we'd have paintings which would also show different people in different communities, because of course at first painting would be focused on paintings of kings and queens and important people and rich people, religious figures, these sort of things. There's also, certain themes that would go through work throughout generations and generations. So if you look at a painting like St. Jerome and the Lion, I think St. Jerome is around 3rd century, like biblically speaking. I don't know the theological developments completely, but theological developments, I don't know what that means either. I don't know the Bible story, is what I'm saying. It's not even in the Bible. This is after the Bible. So yeah, this is like 3rd century, and he's writing, and this lion comes up to him with a thorn stuck in his paw. And St. Jerome, helps get the thorn out of the lion's paw. And then the lion likes him and, just hangs out with him. Anyway, the point being that pre-Renaissance, you'd be making paintings like that. That's a cool series. When I talked about series the other day as well, that's a cool series of painting. If you Google out St. Jerome and the Lion, you find a bunch of different paintings. I think Cranach the Elder did one, I think. But there'll be a lot of different variations of that same theme. And that can just be a good thing for you to do, is focus on a theme. If you don't want a new one, you can go to an older one as well. Go to an older theme and just remake it. Thanks, Todd. It says, love the harmony happening in the upper right between the light gray form and the orangish thing. Yeah, it's definitely a thing. Still working out the space. You can check out my other work. My name's Jeremiah Polachek on Instagram, and kind of get an idea where these types of paintings are headed. as well. It's in an in-between stage. It's a tween painting, basically, right? Thanks, George. I was always thinking, like, what if we had... Why is it not acceptable to have painting teachers that are like football coaches? Like you're out in a field in 95-degree weather, and a football coach who is generally like the highest paid employee, any state employee in most states in the United States, at least the highest paid state employee is a football coach, and we want these football coaches basically just to yell at kids in 95-degree weather, don't give up. You can do it. Come on. And I was just thinking, what if we had painting? I won't do it. I wouldn't be like that. But, what if we had painting teachers that were like that? They were like drill sergeants or football coaches or something. And they just pushed you. Or like a hype man. A hype man would be great for painting. Just a person hanging out in your studio telling that you got this, right? So slowly closing into 1 hour. I'm gonna try to paint and talk for 2 hours is my goal today. Working up and up and up. I'd like to get to 12 hours if possible. We'll see. Like I used to do back in the day. Of course, the world of dreams always coming into paintings as well. And one thing I'm kind of doing with these paintings, when I talk about these paintings, I did that whole video on be very concrete with your words. Be very, simple with what you're doing. And then you see what I paint, right? But, a lot of what I'm doing is just kind of about the elasticity of the face and the way we're smushing our faces around in digital media at this point. I've been making a lot of paintings throughout the years about digital media and our relationship to it, as well as avatars. I think I'll be giving this creature maybe some kitty cat ears or something like that. These two blue things look kind of like eyeballs. Maybe make those into eyes. Let's see here. Get a better spot. Any questions, feel free to ask. Just chugging along, going for 2 hours today. Yeah, I'm on Instagram. My name's Jeremiah Polachek on Instagram. And then I have a painting course in Instagram, which is just called Painting Course. Those are my two Instagram accounts. So you can kind of get an idea where I'm headed with those. Just going in for a nice Saturday painting session here in Prague, Czech Republic. Breaking in my new studio with a new painting. I actually got this painting out of... This place was an antique shop before, and they're taking their time taking the antiques out. So I got a bunch of these chandeliers in here still that they were selling, all these old hand-blown glass chandeliers and stuff. But they had a couple paintings, and they're like, do you want these paintings? That's not how people sound in Prague, by the way. But... yeah, there was a couple paintings that had some frames, and this is just one of those crappy paintings. So I think if you ever hard up for painting surfaces or painting materials, as I am right now, since all the art stores are closed and I can't get somebody to cut masonite because the hardware stores are all closed, so I can't get a bunch of masonite cut. So I'm just painting on this old painting. It was just those reproductions. It's kind of a plastic, fake plasticky canvas surface where they would like print something on a canvas in a painting. It's probably like 40 years old, I guess, the surface that I'm working on. But it does the job. When I started out, it was really sucking a lot of the paint in, actually. And so I just messed it up quite a bit, poured a bunch of paint thinner onto it, and used a lot of oil, and let that dry for a day, built up the surface, and yeah. Now it's a decent surface to paint on, but it took a little bit of work. Usually my paintings aren't actually workable until about 3 or 4 days in. That's when they start working decently. So just in terms of the paint application and how I feel comfortable with the paint. And all I'm using here is just a little bit of linseed oil. I clean my brush occasionally with the mineral spirits, but I don't really have great ventilation here. So I'm just using linseed oil, a little bit of liquid in the linseed oil to make it dry quicker, which it's not doing. It's not cooperating because it's just too cold. But no need for a lot of paint thinner. One thing people don't know, a lot of people don't know, that paint thinner is pretty new to the game, actually. I think it's only about 150 years old or so that artists started using it. Around the Impressionists, they began using it. And so, you know, this really taking the oil out of the paint, because when you're using linseed oil, of course you're making the paint fatter. You know, you're adding more linseed oil to it. Well, paint thinner is essentially, you know, it's doing that. It's thinning the paint. So there's not a lot of oil in it at all, and that's just a type of consistency of paint that didn't exist for a long time. When you look at the old Jan van Eyck paintings and all this sort of stuff, they weren't, you know, starting off with a thinned down version of paint. So artists, Jim Winterlink asking what artists you admire, get inspired by, and like. I could go on. I like George Condo. I like Peter Saul. I like Giacometti, Picasso, contemporary people. I like Nicholas Uribe. I like Alison Summers. I like Lola Gill, Danica Lundy. I try to, you know, I'm looking all the time at different paintings, and so it's kind of like my favorite music or favorite movie or something like that. Francis Bacon, of course, is important. I just like good painting, I guess. Just kind of a weird thing to say. It's like when people like say, I just like good music, or they always say, I like a lot of different types of music except country. No, I like country actually too, but I like a lot of different types of paintings. I like paintings that don't look anything like my paintings. I can't help but the more I learn about artists, the more I start liking their paintings. That's like a curse of mine. Like even painters that I hated when I first started seeing them, I couldn't stand them. Fragonard and Bouguereau. When I first saw Fragonard, I thought it was like everything wrong with the world. was Fragonard, pretty much. But then I kind of like learned more about him, and I'm like, okay, that's all right. I can deal with Fragonard. I never got the deal with Aang. I brought up Aang before, you know, Ingres, Angra, Aang. I never got the deal with him. Maybe I'm gonna live to regret saying that, especially on a video. But I never got the deal with him, and he, of course, was making fun of Rubens, which is not cool either. And because I really like Rubens. I can go anywhere, I guess, with paintings and my inspiration. Matthew Bollinger, he's got a great approach to painting that I like a lot. He does all figurative work. I tend to like figurative work more than anything else. The eyes are beginning to come out of this thing. Checking the chat. Oh, yeah. H.R. Giger. You can see what it looks like in the frame here. This is that cheesy gold frame. It's not a terrible frame. It's not that bad. Get an idea where we're at. Yeah, doing all right. I guess this is my 1 hour in. Take a break. Look at it. So yeah, I kind of like the frame. You know, it comes with the frame. It's a good way to, if you need something to paint on and you need a frame, just go to a thrift store or go to an antique shop, a cheap antique shop. They used to have good junk shops. They don't really have good junk shops anymore, you know? Everybody started collecting stuff, and now there's no more good junk shops. I love antiquing and junk shopping and flea marketing. It was my favorite thing. In the US, there's way better junk. Probably just more buying of stuff. So there's more junk as well, I guess. Trying to get situated here with this thing. We get back into it. Go in for another hour. Todd H. asking, the alien creature designer. Yeah, that's H.R. Giger, Swiss artist. And he was actually the concept artist for Jodorowsky's movie called Dune. I think they're going to remake Dune again. Why? Don't, please. But just make Jodorowsky's Dune. They should let Jodorowsky direct it. But that's an awesome documentary if you want to check it out, called Jodorowsky's Dune. And he had like Salvador Dali was going to be the emperor, and I think David Bowie was in it, and H.R. Giger was the set designer for it, actually. And so he made all these concept drawings for Dune, for Jodorowsky's Dune, and then pretty much Hollywood found out that he was, you know, awesome at making this stuff, and then he got tasked with making Alien, actually. So that's how Alien came to be. It was crazy Jodorowsky. Not crazy, a visionary. Jodorowsky is definitely a visionary. George is asking, how come you don't use a wood type thing so your hand doesn't touch the paint? I need a wood type thing. I think it's called a dowel, a wooden dowel. And you can also use just a broomstick or something like that too will work. It doesn't need to be anything that special or anything. You can just use a broomstick and that'll work too. But yeah, that would be helpful because it's totally totally wet. And that's one of the biggest pain. These simple things are a pain. Oil paint staying wet so it gets on your hands. Of course, I'd like to have some gloves, but I'm not able to find any right now. Been looking on tattoo websites and stuff, just trying to find some nitrile gloves. I'm used to painting with gloves for some reason. It feels like I don't care as much if I'm getting paint on my hands. It's not a big deal getting paint on your hands, but then you gotta wash your hands and But you can see where got a mouth thing kind of happening now down there. I'm gonna go back into this eye. Yeah, just trying to get back into that eye, pop it in. It's really a pain trying to get this to, just gotta really freestyle it. My wife can't stand how I hold a paintbrush, how I hold a pencil. They're very particular about how you hold pencils here in Czech Republic. They, if you don't hold a pencil properly, they basically think you're a Neanderthal. That's actually one of my ideas for a movie. Is I feel like at some point they got to make a movie about Neanderthals and humans, since we all existed at the same time. And you know, we had interspecies love between humans and Neanderthals. So we gotta get that movie made. And maybe the Neanderthals were just peace-loving hippies, you know? And us humans were the ones with farming and all this sort of stuff, starting wars. I think there's a theory, actually, that humans, from an evolutionary perspective, did better because they were angry apes. We got really angry and fought for stuff. So maybe the Neanderthals were just chilling. I don't know about this eye. It's gonna take another day on this eye, but I'm just gonna block it in at this point. You can go back and make it darker later after this layer dries. Okay, it's starting to come out. Something's starting to emerge from this face, this mess. Make a mess and paint your way out of it. I certainly made the mess at this point. Trying to paint my way back. But you can see other abstract paintings, non-figurative art, it's also called, non-representational art. So immediately, I guess, when you have abstraction with representation, people think of surrealism quite often. And Dali, of course. I like De Chirico. It's kind of my favorite of all of them. He kind of became famous again, oddly, with all of these, I don't know, what do they call it, vaporwave, which is that, it's like a type of music and aesthetic, I guess, that got popular in Tumblr and these places like 6 years ago. But De Chirico was kind of like vaporwave in a way, because if you look at like vaporwave design, it was all about like 80s aesthetics, but with Greek statues and stuff like that. So Takiriko also had these kind of vacant landscapes when he first started off, with these statues crumbling within them. And oftentimes when we think of these big, vast landscapes, we immediately kind of go to this dream state as well, which I think is also how we think of the internet in a way. It's kind of this giant collective dream of some sort. And Takiriko was doing that 100 years ago. And then it kind of popped back up a couple years ago with Vaporwave. There was a lot of criticism of Vaporwave, saying that it was, frozen capitalism, that we couldn't get beyond a certain point. We're just stuck looking to the past. We want to deconstruct the present because there isn't some grand narrative holding everything together anymore. I like how it looks. I like Vaporwave stuff. But I can't help but be a fan of the 80s. Growing up at that time. Speaking of which, hopefully Stranger Things comes back sooner rather than later. They've been on a break for quite a while now. George is asking, why is my phone there? I have a Bruce Hogarth eye. Look up Hogarth Dynamic Anatomy. I think he was in the 30s, 1930s or so. Hogarth is a good person to look at for anatomy stuff. And another good person to look at that from that time is called Loomis. So there's a lot of books Loomis made. Loomis, How to Draw the Head. Loomis, How to Draw the Figure. All these different Loomis drawing books that came out in the 1920s, 1930s. Which was really a time when a lot of different people could just get interested in painting. So we think about kind of the democratization of paint, and what I mean by that democratization, I just mean everybody kind of gets to paint now. It's not just the famous people or the gifted, so to speak. You can sit down on a Sunday, just go to the art store, get a canvas, get some paints. It's accessible to everybody. And that was kind of a phenomenon of the 1920s, where, of course, we had the Roaring Twenties after the Spanish flu epidemic of 1919, 1920. Of course, no relation to 2020, 100 years ago, but right? But then we had the Roaring Twenties after that. So here's to hoping we have another Roaring Twenties. Wouldn't that be awesome? I should get a suit, I could get a suit. All the girls, they had those flapper dresses and stuff. Jazz was exploding at that time. A lot of revolutionary ideas, music, art, all came out of the 1920s. And some people think part of that was a reaction to the Spanish flu, which was a major event, a major downer, kind of like we're in right now. We're in the montage part of the pandemic currently. So hopefully we come out of that side. But where was I going? Yeah, they made a bunch of artist books. Part of that cultural renaissance that occurred during the 1920s was a lot of people started getting interested in painting and drawing. And it wasn't just like, the certain people could paint and draw, like I was saying, like anybody could just go and do it. And so a lot of people were just interested in drawing, a lot of people were interested in poetry, music, breaking down boundaries. And That's why a lot of these books were made. So if you look at Loomis, the Loomis books, they're actually really good, though. They still use them a lot with concept art and people that want to learn concept art and these sort of things. They're actually still used quite frequently just because they use the primitive shapes. You know, they use the basic sphere, the cube, the cylinder, pyramid, all these sorts of things. And yeah, check them out if you can. Loomis, How to Draw the Head. I think it's even called, yeah, How to Draw Portraits, How to Draw Hands, all those sort of things. See, Todd is saying FM Attack out of Canada is a good new wave vaporwave band. I'll check them out. Closing in on an hour and 16 minutes so far. Committed to 2 hours. Hopefully make it. Chugging along. Never know what's going to happen in these sorts of paintings. Gonna have to go for the pinky move here. Going for the pinky move. Yo. See how that works. Good old pinky move. So I can see George is asking, any Greek artists I like? There's actually, I love just the original pots and all those sorts of things. And then there's a guy, a contemporary person, Cleon Peterson, is somebody who looks at this kind of, those black and white pottery drawings that they used to do on pots, which I think was really cool. And I remember years ago, I was trying to think about the horizon, and the horizon being a point where, you know, the sky meets the earth, essentially. And, you know, we often think about the heavenly plane and, you know, the earthly plane and these sort of things. And the horizon line being the place where those two things meet. And, of course, you know, horizon lines are really important just in general with painting. For various reasons. But I was thinking, you know, when was the first horizon line, actually? And in my research, I remember I was looking into a lot of different paintings and trying to figure out when was the first horizon line actually in painting. If you look at a lot of, you know, medieval work, you kind of get a sky, and I guess you get a horizon line, but you don't even see... like a whole, it's not a horizon line, like a landscape horizon line, like the way we think of it. But anyway, the Greeks had some wall paintings that they did, seascape paintings, and there's some horizon lines in those as well. Those are all unattributed. I don't even know how old they are. I don't go back that far. I like start at, I don't know, 1300? My painting knowledge goes like Lascaux Caves, 26,000 years ago, and then it kind of skips to about 1300. So I don't know how old those Greek paintings are, the wall paintings. But they're good ones to check out. Those, in terms of like Greek paintings, I like those quite a bit. Yeah, Cleon Peterson is an interesting case as well. You'll find some interviews with him and stuff on YouTube, definitely. He's probably 45, 46, maybe 50 years old, I guess. And I think he had some relation to Shepard Fairey, the guy who started Obey and all that sort of stuff. When I was back in Glasgow, I still remember seeing that Andre the Giant has a posse sticker when I was still around there. And there was actually Banksy's. There was still Banksy's on the wall. There was a ATM machine I would go to, and right by the ATM machine there was a Banksy of the monkey jumping onto the detonation box in Glasgow as well. And he had a big show at a place called the Arches, which was a legendary club in Glasgow that was an old train. I think they like parked trains there, so they had like arched ceilings like you'd find or not a train, subway. It was like an old subway station, so they had these arches like, you know, you would have for tunnels for a subway. And I remember Banksy had a show there, and put a bunch of stencils on the wall and stuff like that. Who knows how much those things would be worth now. There's Exit Through the Gift Shop. If you haven't seen it already, that's a classic one to check out as well. It's a really good documentary just about painting. I like Banksy. He gets a lot of flack, I think, in some ways, or they get a lot of flack. Nobody knows who they are, if it's a collective of people. But I think they make really interesting work. And Exit Through the Gift Shop, I really enjoyed it. And I love that idea of creating completely different art forms. You know, if it's installing a show on the street or acting like you're selling these paintings that are fake Banksies, you know, as a street merchant, but they're actually, you know, worth $120,000 or something like that. I think that's pretty cool. But Cleon Peterson and Shepard Fairey somehow helped him out. The thing I have with Shepard Fairey is being a fan of 80s movies. And if anybody doesn't know this, the whole obey thing comes from John Carpenter's movie called They Live, which came out in 1988. And so if you see all the obey stuff everywhere. If you want to see where obey came from, it's directly lifted. The font, everything is from this 1988 science fiction kind of action movie. And it's a John Carpenter movie. Roddy Piper's in it. Roddy Piper, you know. Can't go wrong, really, with everyone. If you got Roddy Piper, I mean, come on. So, yeah, Meg Foster's in it as well. And it's basically about these glasses, and they're essentially reality glasses. So it's a critique of mass media consumption. And the main character in the movie finds these reality glasses that when you put these glasses on, you can see the true message of every single advertisement that you're looking at. And so the person puts them on, and then they look up at a billboard, and it says like reproduce, and he looks at one billboard, and then it just says obey. And that's where Shepard Fairey got the whole obey thing. It's directly lifted from that film, but it's a classic. I can't help but just love the old 80s films. And Roddy Piper. What was that other one he was in? Can't remember. He was like a frog. There was like these giant frogs and stuff like that. Hell Comes to Frogtown. That's what it's called. And I think it came out around the same time as They Live did. But yeah, Hell Comes to Frogtown. It's a really, really weird movie where Roddy Piper plays he's like one of the last men in this world full of women. And I don't even know what his quest is, but he has to fight like all these giant frog creatures in a post-apocalyptic landscape. So that's another good one to check out if you got the time. I go deep into 80s movies. I just can't help it. Looks like we're about an hour and a half in. Still doing all right, going strong. Pericles Pantasis. Okay, I don't know that painter. A Greek painter George is mentioning here. Todd H has seen. I'm not sure if it's Frog Goes to Helltown or They Live. I'm just getting caught up with the chat here. But going back to practical effects, I mean, everything's digital now, and now with painting, I think really part of the desire for painting is to get away from the digital. I really do, and I think people's desire for these things. I teach a lot of students that are involved with video, and they use sensors to create these large immersive installations, and using Oculus and augmented reality and all this sort of stuff to create these installations and stuff like that. And every time they get to my drawing class, they would always just say, like, oh, finally, I don't have to stare at a screen. It was just a relief. So I'm happy to be that relief. Painting is kind of like analog records in my mind, really, because there's no reason for us to listen to records on a record player, You can just play Spotify or whatever. But for some reason, we still like the way a record feels. We like the way the case feels in our hands. We like putting the record on the record player and cleaning it off, hearing the crackles, knowing that something physical is happening with the record player. There's an actual needle going into a groove, which is vibrating, making a sound, going through a speaker. And we still like all that stuff for some reason. It's just, we can't help it. We're humans. Who knows, maybe in 100 years, somebody will see this video and think it's ridiculous that we're hanging on to these ancient ways of painting, or maybe these ancient ways of expressing ourselves just aren't going to ever go away. Painting still resonates. Painting still resonates with a lot of people. And no matter how much people want it to go away, it just keeps coming back. It just doesn't go away. They were saying painting is dead back in the 1960s. Like 60 years ago. It's still going strong. So for some reason, people still just love painting, and I love the wall. I think the wall is great. There's a joke, a sculpture joke, which is, what is a sculpture, basically? And it's what you back into when you're trying to see a painting in a museum, is the punchline. Sorry, a little bit of a dad joke there. But there's some truth to it, because the wall is great. Everybody's got a wall. Everybody's got a wall. Anybody, a wall is a great space for showing work. And you got a wall in your house. You got walls in museums. What's a museum? It's just a bunch of walls, really. There's some place to put some sculptures. I don't know. I just don't pay much attention to sculpture, actually. But essentially, museums are just walls. And we got walls in our houses, too. So painting is kind of an equal opportunity art form. We can live with them. We can put them in museums. We can put them in our walls ourselves as well. And a wall is a good way to look at art. There's a reason why the Assyrians were making those dragon, lion, mosaic creatures on walls. They didn't make statues of them. Maybe they did as well, but they put them on the walls. So the wall is great. use the walls in your home, use the walls wherever you can. Fill them up with stuff that inspires you, especially during these times. I see Todd is, getting into Zardos. Man, bring a tear to my eye. Sean Connery. But the quote is, "We are the custodians of the past for an unknown future." Zardos is a really weird movie. Jodorowsky comes out of this same 70s weirdness as well, what I was speaking about previously. But yeah, Zardos is Sean Connery. I don't remember all of it. I remember what Zardoz is. I won't spoiler it. I won't give it away. But I remember it was something about all these guns were like pouring out of this giant sculpture's mouths, and they were giving all these guns to these kind of future primitive types of people. And Sean Connery is in like his underwear and a leotard, like a leather leotard of some sort. He looks great. It's my favorite. It's like one of my favorite Sean Connery movies. Is Zardoz or Zardos. Such an awesome film. And I love those movies because, you know, they were really something that we don't really have now, where everything is so planned. All these people planning stuff so much with every single film. Exactly, you know, there's thousands and thousands of people working on Aquaman or whatever it is. And back in the day, they just give one person like unbelievable amount of authority to make a movie. Like, why? They were young. They were like 26 years old when they were making these things. Like, what? You're giving a 26-year-old like $12 million to make a movie and you didn't even read the script? Like, what? But, you know, it made a lot of schlocky films, but it also resulted in some real treasures like Zardos and Hell Goes to Frogtown, because they're just odd. You know, there's a certain type of movie that's just odd. It's weird. It's strange. It's like, how did this possibly get made? Well, it got made because the people funding it didn't have to oversee it. Now we give all these people that are funding the movie, we give them artistic license to try to give their input. I think we should go back to, okay, you're the rich person, you're giving the money. All right, well, the director is the only person that gets to count. And there's a great film, documentary, Canon Films. It's called like Electric Boogaloo from Canon, or Canon Films or something like that. And it's all about that style of filmmaking. Golan Globus were the two producers who would make all these different movies. And they really made the movies without even knowing what they were making. You know, sometimes they would fund a movie, they would go watch another movie that they thought they funded, and then they would be upset that it wasn't the movie that they thought they funded. So they had like no connection to the movies that they were funding at all, which gave the people making them a lot of artistic license as well. So oversight, I don't know, oversight with artists, not always the best thing. But there's always the argument, you know, that artists have always been commercial artists, right? That like Michelangelo had to work for the Catholic Church in order to make the Sistine Chapel. And that's kind of true in a way, I guess. It's kind of true. But at the same time, artists kind of consistently fought against those things, and I think we're kind of in a situation now where people are just more than happy to work with whatever, Fabergé or something like that, and just be like, okay, I'll change whatever you need because I get money. I would probably do the same thing. I'm not blaming them, you know. It's just the age we live in. We previously had these solitary individuals who were considered geniuses. They might have been geniuses. You know, I don't like the idea that genius doesn't exist. That really annoys me. I don't think I'm a genius. I know I'm not a genius. I remember, like, growing up, being annoyed when I was like 9 years old. I remember being annoyed that I wasn't a prodigy. You know? And so a lot of people now, you'll hear in art school all the time that genius is this idea which is perpetuated that, you know, one person is the best artist, right? And they want to put forth this idea that, oh, there's many artists and maybe we shouldn't just be focusing on one individual because there's a lot of people that are good at stuff. And I don't know, man. I don't know. I think if we look at, have you seen prodigies? Have you seen those kids that are like 9? You know, what's that girl's name? Alma Deutscher. Look up her, Alma Deutscher. Look up the video of her playing piano. And they like pull 4 notes out of a hat. This guy pulls 4 notes out of a hat. She's like 9 years old and gives them to her. And she has to compose something from these 4 notes in like 30 seconds. And it's immediately beautiful. And she has perfect pitch. They're talking to her and they're asking her, they're like, how do you come up with your ideas for your operas? She's like 10, you know? And she's just like, oh, I come up with a lot of ideas while I'm skipping rope. You know? So I don't know, if we have individuals like that out there, I think she's probably like 15 now, 16 now, but she's had full operas. I think she did Cinderella. She did an opera of Cinderella in Austria or something like that. And you know, she's like 16 now. She's still making stuff. She's still doing stuff. And so there's always people that just kind of stand out and you're just like, whoa, okay, you really, really get this. Like, you truly have a gift of some sort. The rest of us just have to slog through life and do our 10,000 hours. You know, there are some gifts, I think, that people get occasionally. That doesn't mean not everyone can learn how to paint and not everyone can learn how to draw, but there's certain people that do those 10,000 hours really, really early in life. If we're talking about Picasso, of course, you know, had his uncle was working at an art school and drawing pigeons all the time. His uncle was known as this amazing pigeon painter, actually. And so he would just draw pigeons nonstop. And Picasso, if you look at the earliest Picasso, I bet if you Google out early Picasso, you'll probably find some pigeon drawings. And that's pretty much what he did. He was copying his uncle when he was young. But he also showed unbelievable promise from a very young age. And you look at the paintings Picasso. He did one painting called Communion. So Google out Picasso Communion. He did that when he was like 14 years old, oil painting. So, you know, he learned this very realistic technique at a very young age. So by the time he was 20, he could just take that apart completely and, you know, go into his blue period. Of course, Picasso was kind of the rebel. Matisse was the quiet one. You always got to pick, you know, who you like more, Picasso or Matisse. Are you more Picasso or Matisse? And I'm definitely more Picasso. But Matisse is amazing as well. Pattern on pattern on pattern. Another fun fact about Picasso's blue period I heard the other day. I don't know how true it is, but whenever I play Counter-Strike all the time, because I just play one map on Counter-Strike. That's my only game I play. So like a million years ago, my buddy in Prague, Denison, he took me to this internet cafe and he's like, we should play Counter-Strike together. And I'm like, what? And we actually went to an internet cafe. That gives you an idea of how long ago this was as well. And we're sitting in an internet cafe and there's all these Russians like smoking cigarettes. Not that Russians smoke, but these particular Russians in this internet cafe surely were all smoking as well. And it was run by this South Korean guy. And everybody just gamed together. There was like a little LAN network and stuff like that. And at one point, there was actually people walking around they were defending Radio Free Prague, I think, which was this radio station set up before communism fell, and then it got like a proper headquarters and everything. But it used to be like a pro-democracy radio station during communism, and they do a lot of journalism related to, you know, democracy in countries like Russia and Afghanistan and all over the place, China. So you can imagine that they have some pretty strong critics out there, and who knows for what reason they were out there, but they used to have these cops that would walk around with AK-47s outside of this Radio Free Europe building, and they came in to the internet cafe, and they put their guns in the corner, and they were playing with all of us as well. And my buddy Dennison was just like, he's using the AK that he has in real life in this video game. So I don't know if that's really the best thing for these cops to be doing in their break time, to be coming in and playing a video game where they're shooting these things. Alright, so we got some ears going on this guy. Starting to make little cat ears. I'm noticing, like, through the display, my reds aren't really coming through, which is kind of odd. But it goes to show just how much paint changes when we look at it through a screen, I guess. When we're looking at it through a screen compared to when we're looking at it in the real world. Changes quite a bit, actually. All these reds are really toned down quite a bit. The sensor on the camera is trying to be smart, trying to make things look pretty, which is part of what I'm investigating in all these goofy little paintings that I'm working on. So just to reiterate, I'm in my new studio in Prague, Czech Republic, and just started a new program. If you want more information on it, you can go to oko.academy. And oko just means I in Czech. So the Oko Academy, I like how Oko and Aka kind of sound together. Oko Aka. Oko Academy. And I'm going to be doing a one-on-one individual painting lessons and artist mentorship program that people can do in the space. Trying to get back to basics, get back to workshop models of painting and drawing and all these sorts of things. I know we're all spread out, so it's tough to travel. And if you're interested, there's a form on the website on oko.academy, and you can write me there if you're interested in online lessons for a quarter, because I do only work with students for a specific amount of time always, so I work in quarters, which is 7 weeks. But there's some of those options available as well for painting lessons, individual painting lessons, these sorts of things. I'm gonna really try to make these ears pop a little bit more. We're always putting ears on ourselves now in the age of furries. Hopefully with augmented reality. I was thinking one day, maybe we'll all have like some glasses. We're looking at the world and everybody will have like some different filter on their face. And they'll have their avatar that you can see. So I'll look out at my classroom and it'll be like a gerbil head and a pirate and an alien creature. Who knows if I'll be able to deal with humans. But I'm holding out. I'm holding out to deal with humans in real life, hopefully. Closing in. If anybody has any questions,